evening, everybody. My name is Mark, and I'm an alcoholic. Wow, I see a lot of familiar faces here tonight, which is a good thing. I see some people I haven't seen in a long time, too. My story's a little bit different, but I'm an alcoholic, and that's why I'm here tonight. I try and break up when I speak. I try and break up my life into 4 quadrants. I'm 65 years old. I like to break it up into 4 quadrants of 16, plus there's 1 left. And the reason I do that is because it's difficult for me to remember a lot of things that went on in my life when I was younger. And that's due to the abuse of alcohol and drugs. And, it's sad sometimes when you have to admit to yourself that there's a decade that you can't remember. And I see some people shaking their heads so you can relate. That's what alcohol and drugs did to me. I'm really glad to be here tonight. It was approximately 20 months ago, when I met Steve Moore for the first time, and actually he convinced me that I needed to come to a big book, get into the big book with him, and we did the first time. And he also suggested that I join this group, and I did. And the reason that I joined this group, primary purpose, is I needed to do something different in my recovery this time than I had done in the past. And that was get active and get involved. And I've been around AA since 1982. My sober date is April 15th, 2018. So as you can see, there's a big span there. But you know what? That doesn't really matter. What matters is that I'm here tonight. I'm able to share my story. And hopefully for the newcomer, you'll hear something tonight that may help you understand that you're an alcoholic. That's what I was taught many years ago, is that if I get the opportunity to speak at a meeting, it's try and focus on your story so that you can help the newcomer. And that's what I'm going to try and do. I was taught to try and identify and not compare. And I couldn't get that through my thick head. I really struggled with that many years ago when I came around AA for the first time. I was born and raised in Red Bank, New Jersey. I have a younger brother. I have a mom who's still alive, who's 88 years old, will be 89 March 15th. She still doesn't think I'm an alcoholic. Mothers have a great forgetter. Like, my mom can just forget like many years of what the damage was and the craziness that went on. My dad was an alcoholic. He was a chronic alcoholic. He died sober. So that's an unusual thing to say. He was a chronic alcoholic, but he died sober. And the reason that I couldn't really get this program when I first came around was I compared myself to my dad. I compared myself to the Bowery Bum. A lot of you don't know what the Bowery Bum is. I know Carl does. Because he's from up that area. No, I don't mean that in a bad way. He understands because he's been from that area. He's been from up north. It's this disease. I can't tell you how much it takes. They say it's the rapacious predator, and I saw it destroy my family's life at a young age. And throughout my mom's family, there's a lot of alcoholism. My dad was the only alcoholic that I know of in his side of the family, but my mom's side, good Irish people, a lot of drunks, a lot of alcoholics. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I've got this disease. And what I've learned is I have alcoholism, not alcoholism. I have a sponsor today. I use a sponsor. I call him, I talk to him, we go through the book. But more importantly, he's been just someone that's kind of guided me through. And it really helped me because when I came back here, I really struggled at first. It's hard when you're 64 years old and you've had 20 years of sobriety to walk back into the rooms of AA. Very difficult. But I had to just do it. You know, like the Nike commercial, I just had to do it. I'm very fortunate. My wife is still with me. Unbelievable woman. Amazing. She's seen me. She met me when I was sober. She saw me struggle with the disease. She saw me get sober for 20 years. She saw me go back out drinking for 10 years. And I'm back here sober 20 months, April 15th. I'll be able to remember that forever. It's tax day, so I can't forget it. I'm so glad, like I said earlier, I may jump around a little bit. You know, my mind kind of wanders sometimes. You know, growing up in an alcoholic family and seeing what it did to your father, I swore I'd never be like that man. I said, there's no way I'll ever end up like he did. By the time I was 18 years old, when I went off to college, I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to be able to go to college. You know, I was drinking all the time. I was drugging all the time. That's what we did back then. I was a product of the 60s and the 70s. And that's what we did. It was around all the time. The neighborhood I grew up in was a small development in New Jersey. The cops named it Sunken City. That should tell you something. And most of the guys that were there, we all lived the same way, and we all got in trouble together, and we had a lot of fun together. We did. Several of them are no longer alive because of this disease. They were good friends of mine. They never made it here. I'm one of the fortunate ones. You know, I made it back here. To me, that's an amazing thing. You know, at a young age, you know, with my dad being an alcoholic and it destroyed the family, I was visiting him, and they didn't call them rehabs back then, folks. They called them mental institutions. And I was in mental institutions visiting my dad with my younger brother, who's 2 years younger than me and my mom. Seeing him in pajamas and slippers and all these guys around doing the Thorazine shuffle. That's a terrible thing to see at a young age. And that's where I said, I'll never be like my old man. So, you know, high school was kind of like, it was okay. I mean, I was pretty fortunate. I was a good athlete. I got a scholarship to college. I would have never been able to go to college. But I was able to because of that. My mom was probably the one person in my life and my brother's life who kept us on the straight and narrow as much as possible. I was taught right from wrong by her. My dad, the only thing he really told me when he was in the throes of alcoholism is don't smoke cigarettes. That was his wisdom to me. That was it. And so I went off to college and started playing basketball in college. And right away, I lived in the jock dorm. And it was 24-hour visitation. So that means that men can go anywhere, anytime they want. Women can go anywhere, anytime they want. And I thought it was heaven. I thought it was heaven. Because then I didn't have to have the responsibilities anymore. I only had to take care of myself. And there was crazy stuff that went on. And a gentleman sitting in the front here tonight, I heard him say, you know, alcohol allowed him to do things he would never do. And that's my story. I did, and I'm going to try and not curse tonight. That's really difficult for me, but I'm trying to change that. I am. It's tough. But, it's, I did stuff I never thought I'd ever do. I certainly wasn't taught to do those things. But that's what happens when you're drunk and you're high. You'll do stuff that you just can't believe you do. So I drank a lot in college, and I lived in a big room. It was called the rec room. It was 4 guys, 4 big beds, and it was wild. It was wild. It was nonstop partying all the time. And my one roommate, his nickname was Bull, and he called me out. He said, "You know what? You're an alcoholic." I said, "What are you talking about? I drink just like you do." He was right. He was right. I continued to drink and drug throughout my college career. I'm not going to focus on the drugs. I'm here to talk about alcoholism, but it is a part of my story. It's pretty much a part of anybody's story from back in that time, and still today. Still today. I proceeded to, by my junior year in college, I was dating this girl, a beautiful girl. I was crazy about her. I was in love with her. And by the time I was in my junior year, she said, "I've had enough of you." That was because of drinking and drugging. And that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's on now. And so I continued to drink and drug. And I lived in a lot of fear. I lived with a lot of anger. That's the way I grew up. The first 16 years of my life, I lived in fear, and I was angry all the time. I was angry at my own man. I was angry at the world. I didn't know how to deal with it. When you start drinking at 16, you never grow up. Emotionally, you just don't grow up. I know I didn't. I was a child in a big body. That's what I was. Sometimes I think I still am that. But I decided in my junior year, and there was a lot of things I did that were illegal. I'll just leave it at that. While I was in college, a lot of things that I did that were illegal. And how I never ended up in jail for long periods of time, I don't know. I'm very fortunate from that perspective. And when I go to the jail and speak with the guys from this group, and we speak at the jail, and I walk out that door, I am so grateful that I never had to spend any serious time in jail. So somebody was looking out for me. I decided, I didn't have any money at that time. We didn't have money. I was just able to go to school, like I said, because I was on a scholarship. And so I decided to leave college. I decided to give up my scholarship. And I was going to go get a job and make some real money. Now, I don't recommend this to people that are sitting here in the room, especially the young people. I decided I was going to take a job humping furniture for $4.25 an hour. That's the insanity. That's the craziness of this disease. I had a scholarship, right, an opportunity. I was the first one in my family to go to college. I gave it up. I quit. My nickname throughout my early life was Casper. I think you can figure out why. I had a habit of disappearing. I know now they were called blackouts. I was blacking out at a young age. I left college, and I was just a mess. This is where my story gets a little bit kind of squirrely, because I really don't remember. I know people that remember things to the day that happened. My mom says stuff to me that I just am floored. Like, "Do you remember when you were 5 years old?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" But she does. I don't. I bounced around for a while. As I said, I did some things that were illegal. I kept doing those things. And I moved in with some friends, and we were doing crazy stuff, and the people that lived next door to us, they were the head detectives in the town of Red Bank, New Jersey. And we had people coming to the door at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, so you can figure out what we were doing. It was nonstop. Pretty crazy, pretty insane stuff, right? But that's where it takes you. That's where it took me. You know, I was lucky. I left that house and I went back to live with my mom. Now I'm in my late 20s. Having to live with mom, no job. I had no skills. And at 28 years old, that's not a good thing to be saying to yourself. I could remember vividly as I'm standing here tonight, I can remember vividly laying on the couch in my mom's home at 27, 28 years old going, what am I doing here? What am I going to do with my life? I had no idea. I went with a friend to New York City, and we went to a concert. It was a speaking concert that you don't hear that very often anymore. It was Timothy Leary and G. Gordon Liddy. Now you talk about a bizarre debate. That was something, and we partied all night, and we took the train into the city, and we ended up, I went home to my mom's, and at this time I had a vehicle. I had a 64 Mustang that I acquired through a deal. It was an exchange with a friend. And we decided, I slept very little that night, and decided we'd play softball like we always did. You know what that means, kegs of beer. Started drinking at 9 o'clock in the morning. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I decided it was a good idea to drive down to the shore. I lived close to the shore in New Jersey. It was probably a 15, 20-minute drive. Beautiful, beautiful Sunday. And went down to Seabright, New Jersey, which is right on the ocean. And went to my favorite shop in a beer joint. And proceeded to start drinking there. And two friends of mine came in with tuxedos on. And they had been up all night too. And we started to drink Southern Comfort. Now, I don't know about the people sitting in the room here tonight, but that shit's the worst stuff that you could ever drink. Sorry for my language. It's bad. It's bad. And we drank a lot of it. And in a blackout, I decided it was a good idea to get in my car and drive. I drove drunk all the time. And I made it about 2 miles. And I almost split that Mustang in half. I hit an oak tree that was as big as that, around as that piano. And I was very fortunate. I didn't get seriously hurt. I had blood all over me, and I stumbled out of the car. And there's steam and stuff all over the flying. It was crazy. And a gentleman came running down the street. And I, for a minute, popped out of the blackout. And I recognized him. He went to the same high school as I did. His name was Mike Campanella. He was a cop in that town. And he ran up to me and he said, Mark, have you been drinking? I said, hell no. And he knew. He said, we got to get you out of here. Now, this is the difference from back then. That wouldn't happen today. And the cops in that town drove me to the next town, Fairhaven. And the Fairhaven cops took me to Red Bank. And the Red Bank cops took me across the river to Middletown where I lived. And they said, that's it. Middletown was like the Gestapo back then. And so I walked home with blood all over me, walking through the neighborhood that I grew up in, that everybody knew. They knew who I was. And I passed out. And my mom came in the next day and said, where's your car? And I still had the same clothes on. So this is the person in your life who loved you more than anything, and has to see her oldest son laying in bed with blood all over him. And she knew what it was from. And she said, I've had enough. And she goes, you're going to live with your father. And I was like, whoa. They had been divorced for some time. Now remember, I had told you my dad was a chronic alcoholic. He was in Lyons VA hospital for 5 days in an alcoholic coma. That's as close to death as you come from alcohol, and he survived it. And he swore then that he'd never have a drink again, and he didn't. Now, I had heard that many times in my life, and I had said it many times myself. I'll never do it again. He came over to the house. He lived in the next town, and he picked me up, and he said, what's the problem? And I said, I'm not sure. He goes, oh, I know what the problem is. You're an alcoholic, and you don't like it. And I was pissed. I hated what an alcoholic was when I was younger. And I hated being told that I was one, but I was one. And he said, you're going to come live with me, and we have 3 rules. The first rule is you're not going to drink. The second rule is you're going to start going to AA meetings every day. And the third rule is you're going to sleep on the floor and you're going to like it. And it was a small place. It had 1 bedroom, and I slept on a mattress on the floor. And I went to meetings. I went to the first meeting I went to was in Red Bank, New Jersey, and it's a Monday night meeting, speaker meeting, and there's usually 300 people at that meeting. And I'm like, what did I get myself into? What did I get myself into? I'm going to move it along a little bit. I'll just say this. I came into AA. I went to that meeting. I went to 89 meetings, probably more than that, but 89 days in a row I went to a meeting. And on the 89th day, I decided, you know what? I deserve a drink. I deserve a drink. See, I didn't want to accept the fact that I was just like everybody else in those rooms of AA. I was a garden variety drunk. I was a garbage head. If you had something and I was there, I was going to do it. And so I bounced in and out of the rooms for AA for quite some time. I had 8 90-day pins. One of my sponsors said, can I borrow one of your 90-day pins because I want to place it on a gentleman, Adolf his name was, who was 90 years old and had 45 years of sobriety, and wanted to place it in his casket when he passed away. He said, because I know you have plenty of them. I fought denial for a long time. I just denied the fact that I was an alcoholic. I didn't want to be an alcoholic, but I was one. I had several DUIs, DWIs. I was in other car accidents. All the things that come along with drinking too much for too long. I finally put the cork in the bottle. I finally started to really pay attention at the meetings, and I just had had enough. I had had enough. I was going to die a drunk or end up in jail or an institution maybe. I don't know. I just couldn't do it anymore. So I finally decided I need to really get serious about AA, and I did. And I was fortunate. I was sent to an outpatient program by the state of New Jersey from one of my accidents, where I lost my license again. And they send you to drunk driving school, and they show you all those photos and accidents and all that stuff. That didn't scare me. But they sent me to a place called the New Hope Foundation, and it was an outpatient program. New Hope's probably one of the best rehab facilities in New Jersey. It still exists today. And I had a counselor named Tony. And, you know, you fill out the paperwork, and I checked off all the boxes, and I was an alcoholic. And he said, "So what's the problem, Mark? What's the problem? Why can't you get sober?" And he said the same thing that my old man said to me. He goes, "You're an alcoholic and you don't like it. Get over it." Nobody talked to me like that, but he did. And so I started to go to meetings, and I got a sponsor. And I used to go to that outpatient program 3 nights a week. And I met 2 guys, Junior and Dan. Junior was a Spanish fellow who could barely speak English. Dan was called Dan the Gutter Man, and me. And the 3 of us went to meetings. And we went to this program, and we got sober. We got sober. I got a sponsor at that time, finally, who was really the best thing that ever happened to me at that time. Lenny Yanchar was his name, and he was a big man. He was bigger than me. And he said something to me one time when I was still bouncing around, and this was before he became my sponsor, and he said, "If I put a bottle of booze up on that shelf, would you drink it?" And I said, "I don't know, I might." And he said, "See, you don't get it. That's poison to you." That's simple. That's all he said. I never forgot that. Oh, yes, I did. Later on, I'll come to that. I was now married, and I was starting to get sober. And I had a great job that just fell into my lap through a friend of mine. And because I was able to get sober a day at a time, I was able to stay with that job. I had never finished anything. I quit everything. But I stayed with this company. And it was a great company with lots of opportunities. And it was in the home building business. And there's a lot of drinking in the home building business. And it was tough for a while to be around that. But you know what? I was born and raised a Catholic, and I was so angry with God that I just shut him out of my life for a long time. But when I came back into the rooms of AA and I started to go to religious retreats, that's not where I thought I would be, but I went because my sponsor suggested that it was a good idea. And I started to get back some belief in God. And as I started to do the steps with him, I started to believe a little bit more. And I still have a belief in God today. God is my higher power. That's who I call my higher power. I remember them telling me, you know, it can be the table, it can be the chairs when you first come around. That's, for me, I thought that was crazy. But you know what? For someone that may not believe, that's a start. To believe that a power greater than myself, and that was hard for me to admit. My ego was as big as this room. I had a huge ego, yet I always felt like I never, I don't know what the word is. I never quite, met the expectations that I should. I think a lot of us have that. I stayed with that company and I had a fantastic career and I stayed sober and I did everything I did was with sober people. I got rid of the people, the places, and the things immediately. I had to. And I had some good friends and I'm still friends with some of them today. Thank God they're in New Jersey though. But no, I still do. I'm still a human being. And I'll tell you, my friends were glad when I went into AA. They were happy for me because they knew I was a mess. And I stayed sober. And I surrounded myself with sober people. I played golf with sober people. I went on commitments all the time. In New Jersey, it's a little bit different. When you go on a speaking commitment, it's 2 or 3 people speak. You have a leader and a couple people speak. And you have a meeting in the car. And you have a meeting going home. That's how I grew up around AA. And I'm forever grateful for that. When I came back here, and I had a temporary sponsor, Dan Vincenti, who has now passed on. He had 42 years of sobriety, and he said something really important to me. He said, Mark, all those years of sobriety, you didn't forget them. You just have to start over. He was the best thing that happened to me when I came back to this program. I miss him. He's passed on now. So, I was doing all the right things. But then I started to stop going to meetings. And I stopped talking to my sponsor. I hadn't been in the big book in a long time. I hadn't done a 4th step in a long time. And I needed to do a 4th step and a 5th step. But I started the old thinking started to come back. Because I wasn't surrounding myself with sober people. And I wasn't trusting in the program anymore. My ego started to take over again. You hear it time and again. When you hear people go out, and I don't care if it's after 3 months, 9 months, 20 years, 40 years, but you usually hear the same thing. They stop going to meetings. They stop surrounding themselves with sober people. They got away from AA. And then, boom. That's what happened to me. I lived as a dry drunk for probably 2 years. It sucked. It's the worst feeling in the world because you can't drink. You'd like to drink. And you're miserable. And my wife knew it. She kept prompting me, like, when you're going to get back to your meetings? When you're going to get back to your meetings? But she knew that she couldn't force me back. And so I came down here to Pinehurst, North Carolina with one of my friends from New Jersey. Had no intentions of drinking. None. Came down here to play golf. Had a home down here now as a vacation home. And we went to this little bar in town and we were going to have a hamburger. And George ordered a shot of scotch and a Stella. And I said to him, "What's a Stella?" And he said, "Oh, it's this great tasting beer, you got it." He goes, "It's just unbelievable. It's really tasty." And I said, "I'll have 2. I didn't say 1. I said, I'll have 2. Now that's an alcoholic. And he almost jumped across that table at me and said, what the heck are you doing? I'm not going to be the one responsible for you to drink. I said, you're not going to be the one responsible, George. And I remember saying to myself, in my head, you pick up that drink, you're off to the races. I remember thinking that as I'm standing here today. It's vividly etched in my brain. And I had 2. I've been a daily drinker. I've been a periodic drinker. I've been a binge drinker. I've been a blackout drinker. I think I qualify. And I picked up those 2 drinks and I was off to the races. And I didn't drink the rest of that weekend with him. And I don't remember the next time I had a drink, but I had one. And then we had planned a trip with my mom. And I took my 2 nephews who were 20 and 19 at the time. And we went to Ireland. Well, you know what the Irish do. And I decided that's what I'm going to do. And I drank. That went on for 10 years. 10 years of misery. I was a blackout drinker all the time. I didn't remember anything. And I remember waking up every morning saying, I'm not going to do this today. And by 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, it didn't matter. I was drinking. The point in me telling you this is that this disease, when they say it's cunning and it's baffling and it's powerful, they're right. And I used to be the one, when they read how it works, I pay close attention to that today. Because I was the one that was constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself. And when I came back here this time, I had been in Hawaii with my wife. I had been to 2 meetings at the Wilder building before we went to Hawaii because I thought, you know what, I got to really start thinking about stopping drinking. So I went to 2 meetings. Went to Hawaii, went to a meeting in Hawaii. The most beautiful place you could ever go to an AA meeting. Met some great people, sober people, and I was drunk the next day. I drank for 6 days straight. The last day I drank, I don't know how many, I never drank a Mai Tai in my life. I didn't even know what a Mai Tai was. I drank a lot of Mai Tais. And I woke up in Phoenix, Arizona, still drunk. Still drunk. And something happened that day. Laying in that bed in pain like you can't believe, because those things were terrible. They were terrible, but I drank a lot of them. And something happened. And I said, I can't do this anymore. And we flew back to New Jersey, and I was in an AA meeting the next day, down at the Wilder building. And I went to that 7:30 meeting every day for I don't know how long, probably the first year. I probably went to 100 or 50 or 60 meetings in the first 90 days because I had to do something different this time. I had to change. When I came back in here, I had damaged my brain so bad that I literally could not remember from day to day. I couldn't remember people's names that I knew in my neighborhood. I couldn't remember anything, and it scared the heck out of me. You don't have to do that to yourself. You know, this program's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing if you just give it a chance. You know, I just had to put my ego aside. I walked back into those rooms and I wanted to stop. I surrendered this time. And I got that temporary sponsor. No, he got me. We played golf together on Thursday. That was a couple days when I first came back. And I went to the meeting Sunday afternoon across from Elliott's at the church. And it's a beginner's meeting, and they tell you, if you have less than 90 days, tell a little bit about yourself, and I did. And when I was done, Dan used to wear suspenders all the time. He's the only guy I knew that played golf with suspenders on. But he raised his hand and he said, I'm going to be your temporary sponsor. I was like, whoa. Now I'm stuck. Now I'm stuck. Somebody's called me out. And he was a blessing. He was the most humble, spiritual man I've ever met. And he never forced it on me. He just lived it. He lived it. He died 43 years sober. And I have a different sponsor now. I got a sponsor right away. My dad always told me, he said, Mark, you always have to have a sponsor. He used to tell me, I mean, he was getting older. He was getting up there when he finally, before he passed. And he said, my sponsors keep dying, but I get another one. I said, well, they must not like that because you're killing them. No, I shouldn't say that. The other thing I want to tell you, I said my dad was a chronic alcoholic. My dad and I sat on the back porch at my house in Jackson, New Jersey, and we made amends to one another. My brother never got that opportunity with my dad because he's not an alcoholic. I get chills when I tell this, but we made amends. I forgave him and he forgave me. And my dad died of lung cancer, and he was laying in the hospital in Riverview Hospital in New Jersey. And I had seen him, my wife and I had seen him the day before, actually that day. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. I was like, who's calling at 2 o'clock in the morning? I picked it up, and it was my dad. And he could barely speak. And he said, it's time. And I want to tell you two things. He said, I made it. I'm going to die a sober man. And the second thing he said is, I want to tell you that I love you. My dad never said that to me, or very rarely said that before. And he passed that night. I say that because I don't care how far down you've gone, and I used to hear this a lot. Doesn't matter where you get off the elevator. You can take the elevator all the way to the bottom, but you can get off wherever you want, and you start there. If you give this program a chance, you can get sober. I don't care who you are. You just have to give yourself a shot. You just have to listen to the people in these rooms. You have to identify and not compare. I have a life that's so good today. I sponsor guys today. The best thing that ever happened to me was to start to give back. And we're in the book. And we're in the 12 and 12. And I'm watching these guys get sober, but they don't know it. They're helping me stay sober a day at a time. That's what it's all about. It's no longer about Mark. And I volunteer my time today outside this program because you know what? A gentleman in this program told me, you can give back, Mark. It doesn't have to be just an AA. And I do that. And I like it. I still work, I work with my sponsor, and I talk to him. And I go to the jail with Daniel and Steve and Blake and others. And I was blessed. I got the opportunity from Mark, from the colony, who after about 6 months of listening to me, said, I think you'd be really good if you wanted to come down to the colony and speak once a month. And I go, about what? He goes, relapse. Because I do a class on relapse, and you have some experience with that. And you know what? It's the best thing that happened to me in my sobriety. That's where I've met the guys that I'm sponsoring today. And I see the guys at the Arby house, and I see how hard some of them are trying to get sober a day at a time, and the other houses that they have around here. And when I speak there, I'm able to share my experience, strength, and hope. And hopefully, they'll listen. A lot of those guys are sitting in this room tonight. I was blessed when I was given that opportunity. And I continue to do it because I love doing it. That's what I was taught in this program. It's to give back. So that's enough out of me. Thank you very much.